Hello folks and welcome to our game. Myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as always by Michael Verney here. We're going to review all of the big GA talking points from the weekend. Reminder that we're brought to you by ourstore.ie, which is the home of official merchandise for our game. Also, if you want to do one of our coaching clinics, email us at events@ourgame.ie. And also, if you have a big interest in getting us to do a club fundraiser for you, we can certainly do that as well. So same again, email events@ourgame.ie. Michael, how's she cutting?
Good, Shane. And the fella on to me there yesterday actually said, you never get sick of talking shite. Basically, because of the shows that we're doing and the regularity of them, I suppose, that made the club season. And I suppose the odd time you do, but generally no, to be honest with you.
No, we say talk. We've got, how many more years of talking rot on this show do we have? God knows how long. Decades?
I reckon. I actually, it's funny, I used to teach, and I used to end up with woeful bad tonsillitis out of it. And I'd say if I stayed teaching, my voice would probably be gone by the time I'm 45, I'd say. And if I ever go to the sideline or start coaching or that, I'd say I'm going to have to change my approach, because every time, even after the Burr match, I was hoarse for a couple of days after it. But I keep my voice in tune as much as possible to keep doing this as long as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, some amount of drama over the weekend, as there always is, and I'm not talking about the Rugby World Cup. To be fair, Ireland-South Africa was a brilliant game.
Savage, yeah. And you know something? It's rare that these things live up to their billing. I actually think it nearly surpassed its billing, and considering it was only 13-8, just the drama of it all and how close to the line they were at times, and like Ireland didn't play particularly well. Made probably a hell of a lot of mistakes, probably rolled out a bit of a storm in the first half. But it was brilliant. It was brilliant to watch from start to finish.
Yeah, and it was also brilliant. They're after the Australia-Wales game, so Australia were absolutely useless. And Eddie Jones was being interviewed, and there's all this talk about him at the moment doing interviews with Japan. And he was being asked questions directly beside his captain. You know, are you going to be over the team? Have you been doing interviews? Have you another interview? And he said it's a bit red hot around here, and he was talking about he's basically just going to get up and walk out. But imagine you're after managing a team, you've had a useless performance like that, and you're getting this line of question, whether it's right or wrong. Oh, very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it doesn't rain, but it pours. I'm sure that rumour hasn't come up out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? I think it was before the World Cup they're talking about he sat down. And then like there was another kind of a leading question, like, are you going to sit down with them again? And like I think the question was put to the captain, like what's the mood amongst the players? Like if your manager is talking to another team, and this kind of cracked like it was, as you say, it was fairly red hot. The performance on the pitch was absolutely abysmal. And I know you put out a tweet last night, and it was in relation to the Spurs. And you just said amazingly how quickly lovely patterns of play can be established with teams that have looked straitjacketed for a few years beforehand. And it's the same with hurling teams or football teams. You know, a certain manager is over them. Maybe they're bamboozled a bit by tactics, or training's not going particularly well. Performances usually reflect that. Somebody comes in, or they're playing with a bit more freedom, and all of a sudden, like, the style of play is so much easier to watch. Lads are expressing themselves a bit more. They don't, like, the worst thing you can have with any team, and it happens with GA teams a lot, is when players are looking out to the line, I think, for what do we do here? What do we do here? A lot of it, and I know you could say it's cliched, but a lot of it is on instinct, and you play your best stuff when you're actually not thinking about what you're doing a lot of the time, or, you know, you see things on the pitch and it's like, you know, they have a sweeper or whatever. You make a couple of calls amongst your teammates or whatever. You're playing around the sweeper straight away, and it's like that. It's done rapidly or whatever. But it's kind of funny when a new manager takes over, or players are given a new lease of life. They just start to play with a freedom and express themselves like never before, probably a lot of the time.
So Richard Hogan says Ange is really refreshing at Spurs. Now, you don't follow too much soccer. Do you know what his surname is?
Yeah, no, Postecoglou. Yeah, no, I do. Oh, okay. I've been following that because they're going particularly well at the start. Videos have started recirculating about, was he over the Australian soccer team at one stage?
He was over a team in Australia, as far as I know.
So videos have started to kind of recirculating, and it just kind of seems like he's very likable fella, and players are playing for him, and you say that's a cliche too, but a lot of time players, you'll get more out of players if they care about the manager, and there's not a distance between the manager. Now, you can say the flip side of that sometimes as well, but he definitely seems like a very interesting fella.
Yeah, he was an Aussie manager. He was Aussie manager. Yes, Verney says Conor Heaney. While we're speaking of down under, congrats to Conor McKenna. He scored a great goal as Brisbane Lions booked their place in the grand final with a 79-63 victory over Carlton the other day. So might as well mention that.
Just on that, Shano, as well, like considering that's his first year back from, taking, how many years did he take out? 2 years out to play Gaelic football, and like he was unsure of whether he wanted to play AFL again, and he was homesick and everything. Like he is knocking it out of the park this time around. Like he's a much better AFL player than he was in his first stint. And I don't know if that's because he has the monkey off his back and he went home and he won his All-Ireland and now he can go back and play with that bit of freedom or whatever. But he seems to be, as they say down there, he seems to be a much better ball player now. But you see the goal he got, the little interception, flicked the ball off the ground back up into his hands and scored a deadly goal. Yeah, I think they're massive underdogs going into the final next weekend. I think it's Collingwood, is it they're playing?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be unbelievable if the year after Zach Toohey and Mark O'Connor won, that we had a couple of more Irish winners again? It'd be savage.
Yeah, Dara Joyce is involved also. And, we'll be talking a lot about Kilkenny Championship as we go along. We'll be debating whether Liam Blanchfield scored 3 goals or 4 goals, and he's not long back from Australia as well. But it was very hard to tell from the footage. It looked like the ball that was kind of loaded in by Kevin Blanchfield connected with somebody's hurley. Liam Blanchfield didn't exactly, like he did a bit of a fist pump, but was one of those ones where a team scores a goal and it was probably an own goal because the celebration from the closest attacker, it just wasn't that convincing. Let's see as well also, there was 5 games this weekend that we're aware of at senior club over the weekend that were decided by penalties. Now, we did a Twitter poll on it, and I'll bring it up here, and we'll just have a little discussion, and maybe our viewers as well can get their thoughts in. Are penalties the right way to determine the outcome of a match? So in this case, we're obviously talking about senior club championship matches, and maybe junior as well, and intermediate, it's just as important. But 586 votes so far, there's 8 hours left. And yes, 45.9%, no, 54%. Just kind of tells you that people are fairly unsure.
Yeah, it's quite a divisive one, really. Some people are like, and I know you're of this opinion, finish it on the day, adds to the drama, makes it a more memorable spectacle. And I get that. But I think there are stages in the calendar when there are openings. Like say, for example, in Laois yesterday, it finished, I think it was 2-1, was it Camross? Upset Clock Balacala, finished their 4 in a row bid. Like there was loads of time, and the conditions were cat as well. There was loads of time to play that game next weekend when there's football going on with neither of those teams involved in that. And I know that I actually was chatting a fella involved with the winning club there in Camross, and he was nearly half gutted for the Clock Balacala lads because it very easily could have been them on the receiving end of it. I think it's difficult for a club player, whatever about a county player, that's, you've gotten to that standard. You put yourself out there, you're open to a fair whack of criticism. But I'll just ask you this question. Like, imagine you were playing for, we'll just say playing for Borrisoleigh because that's your local parish and where you were brought up. And just say you missed a penalty in a county semi-final and that was the penalty that meant that Borrisoleigh lost the game. It's a tough one. Like, that is a tough one to be going back to your local pub or whatever. I don't even know if I'd go, I'd be that sick. And the best will in the world, most lads wouldn't say anything to you and they'd understand and they'd be like, fair play to you for stepping up or whatever. But you have a couple of idiots in every parish that will say it to you. And when there's drink on board, it could invariably lead to something else. And that's the nature of it. I'm not 100% sure if it's fair necessarily on club players. I don't even know if they practice them. We heard Conor McManus saying earlier on this year and the Monaghan boys saying at county level that they didn't even practice penalties. I think it's a hell of a lot of pressure and responsibility on a player. Now, I'm not saying that they're all should be shrinking violets and saying, we can't put any pressure on players like that. I'm not saying that either. But the consequences of missing are massive.
But what about a player who misses 5 frees and his team lose by a point, or somebody who misses a penalty in the last minute of a game?
He's the expert free taker, though. He's the free taker. Yeah, that's his responsibility.
It could take the same toll. I mean, nobody likes to be the reason that their team lost.
Oh no, 100%. But he's been practicing them for whatever length of time. That's his responsibility.
But we're talking about mental free, like how it would affect you mentally. So irrespective of whether you practice or not, it still could impact you just the same.
Yeah, no, 100% it could. But I think when you're the main free taker or whatever, you've been dealing with that for years or whatever. Whereas if you're the fifth penalty taker and you miss, you've never probably had to deal with it before. I'm just, I think this is the divisiveness of it. It's great.
We've made mistakes where your team ends up losing because you slipped or you kind of miscontrol the ball and the other team scores a goal towards you. We've all been on teams like that. This is the reality too. Things can go wrong.
But I think that's in general play. It's not this, closed skill where everybody is just looking at this and this is I'm not a fan of it. I wouldn't like to win it that way, even though I've won soccer matches on penalty shootouts. I don't like to win that way. I wouldn't particularly like to lose that. I tell you what, if I had put all I had into a club season, either as a manager, a coach, or a player, and you get beaten 2-1 on a penalty shootout, like Clock did, and their 4-in-a-row bid is gone, I don't know.
Tough.
The result shows you're beaten, but you weren't really beaten. You know what I mean? If they played them again, it's funny because that was 22 scores to 18, and I think they had, was it 3-9 to 18 points after normal time. They were probably the better team on the balance of play, and it ends up going out to penalties. Listen, it's the way it is. I don't think you'll hear too many people crying about it, or the people involved. Does that make it still the most efficient or best way to finish off a game?
Yes.
I still don't think it does.
Will you read out that comment from P-Well74?
I'm plenty tough enough, P-Well. I ain't no snowflake either, I can tell you that. But I just, like, when the calendar allows it, and particularly for semi-finals, finals, go another week and see who's the best team over the 60 minutes or the 80 minutes.
Yeah, toughen up, Verney, a snowflake, says P-Well74. Paul Scully adds in, no fear of Verney ever stepping up to hit a penalty.
By Jesus, I stepped up in the soccer back in the day. I'd step up again, no bother at all. Absolutely no issue.
Did you connect with the ball with the correct foot?
Oh my God, I did. Even though I ended up going down a rabbit hole last week of, mad penalties that were taken. And it's just amazing how creative people have gotten in soccer. Like, you're going with the big run up to kick it on your right foot and you kick it with your left and the keeper is lost half a second. Like, you know what I mean? Some of them are absolutely brilliant.
Josh Brady scored a lovely penalty for Éire Óg against Rathvilly in the Carlow semi-final over the weekend. He did the little stutter step, which, in soccer is par for the course, but it's almost putting yourself up on the parapet or sticking your head above the parapet in GA. You're asking for abuse if it goes wrong.
Keeper didn't really go, to be fair. The keeper still went the right side for the penalty. It was just a good penalty, to be fair. Actually, you're leaving yourself up into some amount of criticism, aren't you? Jesus, like that's fair cojones there, because imagine the slagging after if it was saved.
Adrian McGrath says penalties are fine. The game has to be decided. The crack of 5 lads going around in circle and maybe missing 2 or 3 penalties is wrong, though. So obviously, for anyone who doesn't know the rules, that in GA, it's the 5 lads. 5 lads on each team take penalties, and instead of going to the 6th or 7th guy on a team, they continue around with the same guys starting over again. Actually, and not necessarily in the same order as we saw in was it Monaghan Armagh this year?
Yeah, Monaghan Armagh, yeah.
Yeah, and the same guy did miss twice, and Gary Mohan obviously missed his first one, scored his second one. River Power says, Verney's still scarred by the minor. Clare came back stronger for losing that penalty shootout. Toughen up down in Offaly.
How would I be scared by what minor? It was Clare that were beaten by Tipperary. I had no skin in that game.
Well, yeah. Oh, look, more comments coming in here. Pádraig Gill says, penalties wrong in my opinion, Shane. It's a team sport and so the results should be determined on the field of play, not individual set pieces.
Agreed. Yes, I'd agree with that.
Keeps blowing the whistle and turns it into a glorified free-taking competition.
But that's a what if. Like, it's generally I prefer for the game to be decided in general play. I just think it leaves it open for. It leaves it open for a lot of things, but the best team will generally always win in general play. Penalties, not so much.
36 and counting says, good draw for O'Loughlin's and James Stephens and Kilkenny. We'll see what Dicksborough are made of next weekend. I'll just give you out the draw while we're talking about that. Glenmore, this is quarterfinals, Glenmore against Bennett's-Bridge, Dicksborough, Ballyhale, Mullinavat against O'Loughlin Gales, and James Stephens against Greg Ballycallan, Aaron's own Castlecomer against Danesford in relegation. Richard Hogan says, sad to hear of Padjo Whelan's wife passing over the weekend. Sympathy's tall in Burge GA, and we'd certainly echo that. Joe Butler, the big guns are paired against each other in Kilkenny for the quarterfinals next weekend. Current form team versus county and All-Ireland club champions in Dicksborough and Ballyhale Shamrocks. Michael?
Yeah, no, just like that, echo Richard's sentiments there. It was down for Susan Whelan's funeral yesterday. Very sad, obviously. A fine camogie player back in her day, and obviously mother to like three of the, one of the most famous hurling families there is. So deepest sympathies to everybody involved there. I thought one of the comments that came up there was actually very interesting from River Power as well. He said, "I like the five lads things. It's extra cruel. Like it's like maybe like the Mrs. Doyle thing. Maybe I like the misery, of making tea or whatever. It definitely does make it even more cruel." Just a quick couple of things. This is a rapid fire thing, Shane. I want to fire through. It's just thinking different things happen over the weekend, and you're just thinking things that wouldn't happen at inter-county level, but that would happen at club. That happen at club level. I don't know if you saw Eamon McGee's tweet. It was very good. So the Donegal Democrat, and the headline was McGee fist Guidor to winner or whatever, and he just he quote tweeted it saying this is a very misleading headline or whatever, and leaves people open to all sorts of possibilities or whatever. I think he said he hand passed the ball over from 2 yards. The Michael Darren McCauley interview after Ballyboden's win over Castleknock the other night was gas. Like, it's just, we had him for that live show before the All-Ireland final, like, and he's just, you actually don't know what he's going to do. Like, give him a live mic. Like, he just kept, at one stage in the show, and people probably couldn't see, he just kept gesturing out to somebody, a buddy in the crowd, looking to get a drink brought up on stage for him. Like, and it was absolutely comical. Have to say as well, at county level, I think it's very rare that a journalist would put out a tweet saying that, someone did reckless behaviour in a tackle, and then you would have his brother, i.e. John Small, retweet or quote tweeting said tweet and having a go at the journalist in question, which is you. I don't think you'd have that happen at a county level either. Then there was somebody calling you a turncoat.
Do you remember around 2016, the guy who came into goals for Donegal, and he made maybe a mistake or two, and I think Colin Parkinson had tweeted something and he abused Parkinson afterwards.
Go away.
Yeah.
It can happen. Yeah. And then we had a fella calling you a turncoat on Twitter over the weekend for jumping ship and not driving down the motorway to play for Borrisley.
But he called me a glory hunter, and at the time, Coola hadn't got out of the group stages in 5 years. Nobody knew that Con and Sean Tracy and Jake Malone and Colin Cronin and so forth were coming. I hadn't a clue.
People will create whatever narrative they want to create. There was two others then. There was the picture you had up, I thought, which was funny, with the sandpaper on the boss in the Clare game. Now, I don't know if it was on both sides, right? But my theory was that you really only control the ball on one side of your hurl, correct?
For the most part, yeah, that's a fair point.
So with the toe going out to the right, so you questioned what the strike would be like. So maybe he was controlling the ball with the hurl, with the toe going out to the right, and maybe he was a predominantly left-sided striker, and the strike was coming clean off, no sandpaper on the other side. But I'm not 100% sure. As you can see, the big circle there, sandpaper in the middle of it. There's been all sorts of different things tried for extra grip. Whether that worked or not, I'm not so sure. What do you reckon?
Yeah, so that's one of those discs for a sanding machine. The way I look at it there, let's say he does strike with that side of the boss where the sandpaper disc is. And maybe it's absolutely plumb, flush, whatever. But if it's in any way not plumb or flush, I would think that it would get in the way of your striking. So I'm trying to think, if you had a plastic bag around the boss of a hurley and you tried to strike it, it wouldn't connect properly. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit risky. I'm not sure if that would work particularly good.
Good joke for hitting a penalty, maybe. Keeper has no idea where the ball is going to go, and you don't either.
Do you think it actually would even help you? The way you see sometimes people scrape the boss of their hurley or sort of try and get grooves in there to help the touch. Do you think that makes a difference? Do you see this work and what he's doing there?
Not really, but listen, it's all a mental thing. If you think it works, then it works for you. Do you know what I mean? It's all about what works for you. The last thing that I don't think you'd see happen at a club level, and it was on the OurGame Twitter, in the Cork Premier Junior Football Championship quarter-final between Mill Street and I think it's Urhan, which I've never heard of before. URHAN.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, there was slurry being sprayed in the field directly beside the match going on. That would be no issue for me. I actually love the smell of it, and it kind of clears out your system. But for any townies, well, sure, listen, don't they smell like it most of the time? for any townies, it could have been it could have been a farmer trying to put off one of the teams. You just don't know. It could have been a ply or something like that, making this noise in the background and this smell going around. God help the poor spectators that were in about 5 or 10 yards of it being spread. If any of them weren't used to it, it definitely wouldn't agree with them. But there are a few things that happened over the weekend that you definitely wouldn't see happening at inter-county level.
Do you know if there are certain venues in North Dublin that if you're playing, planes are more or less just right overhead you? I'm nearly sure playing in one of the Phoenix pitches that's way out the way, it's like that. Definitely the Whitehall out in Clochran, it's like that. Actually, just back to the penalties thing here, Pádraig Gill says, no one ever mentions the nonsense of how players are excluded from scoring points in the penalty shootout, when points are obviously allowed when taking them generally. Strategies would be interesting. What do you make of that now?
I hadn't talked too much about it.
There's no jeopardy of missing really with that.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, but there's also the carrot of, do I go for the goal or do I take the point? Do you know what I mean? There might be a bit more, might even be a bit more interest there, but we're not like soccer. Like, there's no posts above the goals in soccer. It's no good putting it over the bar. Whereas in a normal play or whatever, you obviously do get a score.
I think Pádraig's a bit of an idiot here. I have to say, I think Pádraig's a bit of an idiot. Imagine it was like 3-3 in the penalty shootout, and it's going, and then the last penalty for a team, and he just taps it over the bar. Where's the jeopardy? Pádraig, get a grip.
But I do think it's like, is there another sport where there's that sort of scenario, like where the ball going over the bar, it is actually worth something in normal play? Just like soccer is the only other one I can think of. Do you know what I mean? What other sports are, like in hockey, if there's a penalty shootout, there's no score for it going over the bar in normal play. GA might be a bit of an anomaly in that regard as well. I can't think of another sport where that's the case.
Yeah. And just back to like the incident from the Ballymun game, which they lost at the weekend against Kilmacud Crokes. I don't think there's an issue with pointing out that, those tackles like did merit cards, and like it is very unusual that Paddy Small wasn't sent off. And people were replying back to me saying, oh, you didn't say that about Johnny Glynn making a laugh about that incident against Sarsfields. Well, no, we talked about it. And we certainly talked about it more than once. And in one of the shows, we were like, well, I mean, what's he doing appealing this? Just take the ban. You obviously have to get a ban with that yourself. Like, so
I think we talked about it at length on the Monday show, and again on the Thursday show, and maybe again even after that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on that as well, the Paddy Small one where he ran into Walsh, I thought was, I don't know how you'd describe that, because the ball was long gone out of the scenario, and he didn't slide or anything like that, but still ended up hitting Walsh. It's hard to know whether he was trying to buy something there or what exactly was going on. But I be honest with you, I probably didn't realize how much of a tank Shane Walsh is until you see that incident. Like, he's even more all there than I thought he was. He obviously ended up on the ground, but Small hit the ground first. I don't know if he was trying to buy a yellow or potentially get Walsh onto a yellow. I don't know, but you would in normal play, you would say that's definitely a yellow card.
Yeah. Let's see. Strange goals at the weekend in Laois and Kilkenny. So Enda Rowland scoring from a puck out, and in Kilkenny there was that own goal. Who scored the own goal again? It was in the Clare game, wasn't it?
It was scored by one of the Greg Ballycannon lads. I'll find it in a second here. Was it Derek? It was Derek Keown, I think. I can't. We'll find in a minute. But it's definitely a weekend of mad goals. Can you remember, like, barring at like under 12 level or something like that, when the full back hits the puck out and it might end up in the back of the net? I've never seen it at senior level. Like, it's seen it get a touch or it end up in around the square. Someone changed the direction of it, but for the ball to go directly from Rowland, who, like, he didn't give a sharp puck out and take it back on the 21. He struck it from inside the 6-yard area and it went the whole way to the net. There was a strong breeze there, but still you don't expect to see that happen. Now, he has some slap of a ball. Of all the keepers to have a wicked slap of a ball, his is particularly potent from distance. I've seen him scoring frees from his own 45, even for Carlo IT and for Laois back in the day as well. And any team that if you're a manager and you have him on your team, you're going to try and use him as much as possible. Did the manager ever think that he'd get a goal out of him from a puck out? Probably not.
Yeah, I would have said that it was coming eventually because of the distance that these goalkeepers are striking. I can remember, was it about 5 years ago, Wexford hosting Galway in the Leinster Championship. I'm trying to remember, was James Scahill still in goals at the time, but he was dropping them more or less under 14. So this was always going to happen at some stage. I wonder, like, do we need to look at something eventually where goalkeepers nearly have to use an outfield player's hurley to take the puck out. It's like they have a specific hurley that, you know, isn't going to allow them to drive it 100 yards? Or is it a case of, like, we're seeing this rule now that's going to happen in the freshers that we talked about last week, where the ball is going to have to go outside the 45, the near 45, for somebody on that team to collect it. Well, you know, eventually will they be like, okay, it can't drop inside the 21 at the far end or something like that? Or will they just kind of look at saying, right, we're going to have to make the slitter change the composition so it can't go quite that far? And like in general, would hurling improve vastly if slitters didn't travel as far? Probably would.
Yeah, I the weight is a big bugbear of mine, and I'm not talking about making the ball unbelievably heavier at like that. But if you look at it, like, remember Seanie McMahon hitting 65s? I think he scored 4 in the 95 All Ireland. I think that was a feat. That was a fair feat to score them back then with the way the ball was. And obviously the players have gotten stronger, better conditioned. Quality of hurls is much better. Sweet spot is better. But I just think, you know, a small bit of weight to the ball, it's not going to slow it down. I just think the ball is traveling like wicked distances at the moment, like a flick of the wrist and you're going 100 yards from the best ball strikers in the game. I just think a tiny bit of weight might help solve it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. Okay, we'll start through some of the different championships here. The Laois semi-finals over the weekend, and we've already been talking a little bit about Laois because of what Enda Rowland did. But Clock Balacalla dethroned after the penalty shootout, like you were saying. It finished 4-14 to 220. I think there was something like 9 points in it at one stage, that Clock had completely dominated the game. But Camross showed huge bravery to come from behind. I think they went ahead late on before ultimately it was taken to extra time. And like 2-1 on penalties, Tomas Keys, he eventually got the winning one. But 2-1 out of, you know, 9 or 10 penalties there, that would just tell you that nerves were shredded. And obviously the weather is so bad around the country. Like, there's some games, like you're looking at that one between Clonlara and Éire Óg on TV, and you're like, how are these boys even holding the hurleys at some stages? Like, you can see that the hurley is nearly slipping out of their hands as they're striking.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with one of the boys in Burr. We played Kilcormac Senior B on a Friday night off, like, I mean to say, as bad of conditions I've ever played in. And it gives you some appreciation for, you know, particularly county players. And I remember even in the middle of the COVID championship, like that All Ireland was played middle of December, and you've the likes of Stephen Bennett and Gerard Hegarty and Aaron Gillan and these boys striking like just seamless. It's like they're playing in the middle of the summer. And even county players like David Reedy was striking his frees pretty good from the first half when I saw it anyway. Yesterday, definitely distance wise anyway. Despite the fact that he's playing in a monsoon, like conditions in Clare yesterday were terrible. You'd have to wonder. I know there were some games.
Hate to live in Clare.
I know there were some games called off or postponed in Galway as a result of the weather. You know, you're kind of half wondering whether some of those games should have went ahead in Cusack Park yesterday, just given how bad it is. It's not like put them two teams out in a dry day and you could get a completely different game and a completely different result. But I suppose that's the way it goes at this time of the year. Look at the Offaly football final yesterday as well. What was it? 6 scores apiece, 1-5 to 6 points, Tullamore and Forban. It was just like a war of attrition in terrible conditions.
Well, and actually in Meath, between the two semi-finals, there was a grand total of 28 scores, both games decided by a point.
Yeah, it probably should. What are we last week in September? Oh, it used to be traditionally like it would really start to turn like in October, and you get, but like we don't really know what we're going to get. Next week it could be grand and it could be dry. It's just kind of that them's are the breaks kind of. But in Laois, yeah, like Clock obviously losing their 4 in a row bid. They would beat Camross comprehensively in last year's final. As you said, Camross, it looked like they were in big bother. I think they were 11-2 down at half time, had a big breeze in the second half, ended up scoring 3-7. There was a controversial kind of an incident at one stage, and the Camross keeper's name escapes me, but the ball broke in around the 13 and he miscontrolled the ball, and one of the Clock lads kind of went to flick it, kind of missed the flick, and the keeper ended up with the ball in his hand and was kind of barreled in over the line, and the Clock lads were calling for a goal. It was kind of Joe Sheridan-esque almost. And I looked at it back again. I was wondering, did the keeper actually pick the ball up off the ground? And was that what they were calling for? But I think he actually did roll it into his hand and get it into his hand. But that's a huge win for Camross. And it's a fairly novel final against Nazarians and Abbey Leaks. Like, I didn't give them any hope, being honest with you, in the preview show against Rathdowney, who are, you know, a real seasoned team in Laois, the likes of Ross King, Paddy Purcell, and many, many more. But that was a massive upset again after extra time. Finished 3-20 to Abbey Leaks, 3-18 to Rathdowney, and that's their first county final since 1949. And yeah, Camross are obviously traditional powerhouses in each, but Abbey Leagues have been there for, over, half a century. So that's going to be a fairly novel final.
Yeah, that'll be absolutely brilliant. Pádraig Gill is continuing to have a go about the penalties, and he was earlier talking about knocking it over the bar. Maybe that should be part of the mix. And he goes, the point of the penalty shootout is to finally determine a winner, not jeopardy. Wise up, Shane. I mean, come on. Imagine that 3-3 and someone just clips the ball over the bar. That would be absolutely ridiculous. Sport is also about a contest. Imagine doing that at the very end of the game. It'd be like, I mean, it's such a shame at the end of the 2012 All-Ireland between Galway and Kilkenny, the draw one. It was so exciting. And then Shefflin taps the penalty over the bar rather than going for the goal, ends up as a draw and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Shefflin probably would have buried that, given his history over the years. Like, I think it took away from it that he didn't just go for a goal a little bit. It's not a criticism, but it's just it would have been more exciting.
Yeah. Imagine, like, it's funny that day was the day that Galway were going to beat Kilkenny, and then you get there. That's why I prefer the replay, because the best team will generally win over the 2 days. That was Galway's day to win, and if they won it on penalties, fair play to them. But like, Kilkenny showed who the better team were the second day, and generally the best team. I don't think the best team should win on, like, if they're the best team, you don't have to win on penalties. You win on the pitch after a 60-minute contest or an extra 20 minutes of extra time or whatever. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about the penalties now at this stage.
Okay, so we've already talked about the quarterfinal draw in Kilkenny. We might as well look at some of the results over the weekend. So we'll start off then with the league final. So Dicksboro beat Glenmore 319 to 15 points. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Both of these league finals and Shield finals are glorified friendlies, really, aren't they?
Yeah, well, like, if you look at James Stephens against O'Loughlin Gales, O'Loughlin's, like, that's usually skin and hair flying. It finished 520 to O'Loughlin's James Stephens 215, and the village rested Niall Brazel, Luke Scanlon and Cian Kenny. I'm sure they all had knocks, but the priority for Brian Cody and Codere was to make sure that they're fit for next week. So for Dicksboro, maybe there's an extra little bit of confidence winning the league final, going in, playing Ballyhale next weekend, and the opportunity maybe to take them off their throne. Do O'Loughlin's get anything from winning the Shield final? Not really. They just kind of continued their winning ways so far under Brian Hogan. But there were definitely some, like, for Greg Ballycallan, when that own goal went in, they were 4 points up before the own goal went in. When that went in, it was 114 to 113 in their favour. And in fairness, it'd be very easy to capitulate. That was on 50 minutes. Like, very, very easy. And you could see, the way something like that happens, and a seasoned player just take it in a stride, jog out, and they go on or whatever. You could see how much it hurt them and how much it looked like it was going to hurt Greg Ballycallan. And they ended up hitting 4 the next 5 points and winning by 4. And that probably wasn't expected by a lot of people. By all accounts, Eugene Cloonan, from chatting to different lads down around there, he's gone with a lot of youth. I think the 4 lads that are in 6th year playing on their team, including Jeff Nary and Aaron McAvoy. Aaron McAvoy is Brian McAvoy's son, obviously, that used to play with Kilkenny, but they're obviously living down around that area. So they've gone with youth. I think they were just, from what I'm hearing, they were just hoping to survive. And now they're in with a chance against the Village in the quarter-final, a Village side who aren't exactly lighting it up. So they could potentially end up in a semi-final, yeah.
I wonder what's the record for the amount of players that are still either teenagers or leaving cert students or whatever playing in the one game. Because, like, 4 seems incredibly high. So fair play to them for
4 on one team, like, yeah that is very high, yeah.
Yeah, so Ballyhale Shamrocks 216. This is like relegation / first round clash. They beat Danesford, who were going into the relegation. We already said they're going to be against Castlecomer. But yeah, Ballyhale still on course for a 6 in a row. Probably not totally flying at the moment, but 2 goals from TJ Reid was very much the difference there. Dean Mason had a great save from Richie Hogan and a penalty. The Shamrocks very much came good in the last quarter, and Colin Fennelly flying in and out. I mean, we're seeing this across the board, aren't we? There's you were saying one of the Burr lads was flying in and out, weren't you?
Yeah, Emmett Nolan was coming in out from Dubai, and I'm not sure exactly where Colin Fennelly is, but he's flying in and out, I think, just for the games, and will keep doing it until their season is over, which could be middle of January. Who knows? But they're down a lot of bodies, obviously. Joey Holden is gone, Brian Cody is gone, I think Ronan Corcoran is away, Joey Cudahy is away. The kind of, like, even last year it was 17 probably players, I'd say, to be missing 4. Like, even Ballyhale are going to struggle to be missing 4. I think Adrian Mullen was quiet, Owen Cody was quiet, and TJ stepped up. He got 2 goals from play, and I believe Colin Fennelly had a right good battle with Paul Murphy that he came out the right side of. But they definitely haven't been convincing so far. Like, you would have, I know the conditions were terrible down in Callum, but you would have been predicting that they'd be able to take care of Danesford relatively easily. And had Mason not pulled off that save from Richie Hogan, it could have been a hell of a lot more interesting than it was. You kind of think that they're thinking that they're coming right now when they need to, but there's also that bit of doubt in your head, and we'll chat about it a bit more on Thursday. That's easily the best quarter-final in Kilkenny. Like, that's the young informed team against the defending All-Ireland champions who have all that experience and all that know-how.
Yeah, Joe Butler is saying that Colin Fennelly's also in Dubai. It's a fair old trip over and back, isn't it? You know,
it is, yeah.
I reckon, other than the city rivals, obviously, within Kilkenny, they don't want each other to win the county title. But I'd say most teams would like to see Ballyhale dethroned at this stage, wouldn't they?
Probably, yeah, probably. And it's not like they're flying high this year either. If they're able to win this year, they're gonna win hanging on, you'd imagine, because of the amount of bodies that they're down. I think Darren Mullen might have been in at the weekend. I think there was talk of him being back in at the weekend as well. But as you said there about Colin flying in from Dubai, it's not like you're flying in from London or somewhere like that, or even Middle Europe or that. Like, that takes a lot out of you. I think there's 2 lads from Cairns O'Reilly's did it last year. Jack Savage did it anyway. It's becoming probably a more common thing probably now in the GA. Travel, obviously, you know, how good travel is makes it a hell of a lot easier, but you still be feeling it, like, you really would. Like, this, you know, like, you try to get ideal preparation before a game, you get your good night's sleep, you get good nutrition into you or whatever. But if you're between traveling to an airport, flying, and getting back home, it's probably taking the guts of about 16 to 18 hours. And in
it's
anything,
right, like.
Yeah, do you know that? But by the time you leave and come back and everything, unless they're flying first class and have their feet up, now that's a different story. I doubt it, though.
Would the Shamrocks have the money for that? Jesus, I don't know. Would any club have the money for that?
Yeah.
Cassius King says Colin Fennelly was a menace, still causes so much trouble when the ball comes near to him.
Can I just ask you something about Colin Fennelly? He was obviously a brilliant county player as well, but he has to go down as one of the greatest club players of all time. Like, just like unbelievably dangerous at club level. He was at county level as well for spells, but like, he's a wrecking ball at club level. And even speaking of wrecking balls at club level, like, Liam Blanchfield ended up with 4-2, I think. I think Joe Butler said in one of the comments that the ball ended up hitting off his leg. He's only back in the country less than a month. Another fella who maybe, like, it's obviously, you couldn't compare him to Colin Fennelly. He didn't do nearly as much at county level, but at club level, like, horse him into the edge of the square and you're going to do well to find someone that's going to be able to handle him. And that's just been the case for the last 6 or 7 years with the Bridge. And fair play to the Bridge. They took care of Tullaroan very professionally. We've kind of maybe questioned them not bringing league form into championship. They definitely have this time around. I think Richie Doyle is the manager, and Dan Shannon's involved with him, obviously, on the sideline as well. And their quarter-final, who's their quarter-final against again? It's one of the tastier ones as well.
It's against Glenmore.
Yeah, like, that's a tasty quarter-final as well. That is tasty. I know Glenmore are beaten in the league final, was generally 2 teams coming in with a decent bit of form. Again, that would fancy their chances potentially getting to a final if it opens up for them.
Yeah, I watched that Tullaroan Bridge game. It was very high scoring game for a finish in terms of goals. There was 8 goals, but like, the Bridge have Jason Clear back, and he's playing at 11 this year. They've Timmy Kelly, Bill Hughes, James Hughes. They're all college winners with Kieran's. They're back into the team. They seem to be going well. Obviously, you've mentioned Liam Blanchfield being back from Australia. So everything seems to be pushing kind of in the right direction at the moment. Like, the conditions were just dreadful for this match, which we also mentioned for the Clare Championship earlier, but they were awful here. And like, in terms of the flow of the game, like, I think it was Mark Simpson. Is it Simpson or Sampson? He's playing for Tullaroan. He had a goal chance after 30 seconds maybe. Then I think it was James Hughes scored a goal almost straight away then for Bennett's Bridge. And like, it was brute force ignorance from Liam Blanchfield that allowed him to score a couple of those goals. Like, when you're that strong and that big and all that kind of stuff, and obviously you can hurl as well, it really does kind of stand to your team having someone that strong in the full forward line. And a couple of the different Tullaroan lads tried gamely on him, but weren't able to kind of keep him down. Mossy Keogh was kind of overturned around midfield. He was on the ball constantly, but he was overturned once or twice, as many players were. and that led to the second goal for Blanchfield, who threw off a couple of players before blasting into the roof of the net. To be fair to Mossy Keown, he then got a goal a couple of minutes later. A free went into the area, and he sort of whipped the rebound into the net. I did feel like for Tullaroan, who battled gamely, and I thought Shane Walsh was quite good in the full forward line, and he was always trying to knit play, but they probably wanted a small bit more out of young Tommy Walsh. Obviously, older Tommy Walsh came on and got a goal for himself, and Pádraig Walsh probably would have liked to get into the game a little bit more. But to be fair to Bennett's Bridge, they did well to keep him out of it. Whereas the other side, like Mossy Keown, who I've mentioned, he was on the ball an awful lot. David Blanchfield was on the ball a lot. Credit to Bill Gaffney as well. He scored a brilliant one-handed goal. Like, he just swiped across it left-handed, actually, with 3 minutes to go before Blanchfield cancelled his goal out a minute later. But yeah, brilliant win for Bennett's Bridge now. And if you were to sort of say that, Ballyhale Shamrocks are still the favourites going into the knockout stages, who would you be having kind of next in the list from then on?
Funnily enough, I'd have O'Loughlin Gales very, very high. Very consistent throughout the league stages. Obviously have half of the Kilkenny backline, and Owen Wall is in good form. He got a hat-trick in that Shield final against James Stephens. I'd have O'Loughlin's very, very high. I got Tullaroan wrong big time, because it was probably maybe going on, form they'd shown last year. They were good enough this year up until that last group game, and I don't know what the wheels kind of came off a bit. Like, you would have been expecting that to be a 50-50 game against the Bridge, but I'd have O'Loughlin's very high, and obviously Dixborough are going to be very high as well, but given the form that they brought into it. Dixborough, outside of that 2018 win, have probably flattered to deceive a bit. Were hammered in that county final. It was a COVID county final in 2020, I think. Were annihilated by Ballyhale that day. I'd probably have O'Loughlin's number 2, being honest with you, and you could throw a blanket over a good few of the rest of them then.
Yeah, so a comment there from Joe Butler. We're doing okay, but don't be blowing us up, Michael. That's to do with O'Loughlin.
This is like the Drake curse.
Look, there's a comment in here which is quite interesting from Carl O'Brien. I just heard the argument that the new slitters are too light, and that's why the new balls travel so far. So I weighed an old cuff ball used in the 90s and a new Burke ball. The new ball was heavier. So that's why sometimes I never just say, let's make the ball heavier. Because obviously if you have a very powerful hurley, like a heavy hurley and a heavy ball, the ball should travel an awful lot further than the smaller old hurleys where the boss was like that and a lighter ball. You would, like, obviously the heavier ball and heavier hurley is going to drive it longer. So that's why I never fully say we should make a heavier ball. We should just make a ball whose composition means it can't travel as far.
I wouldn't have been familiar with the cuff ball at all. Would you?
No, not as much. Like, the name definitely isn't totally unfamiliar, but I would think when I was young, you had balls like the Cummins ball, the Newry ball, which you cut the hands off you with the ridges, balls like that.
Oh, that was, like, geez, if you hit that 80 yards, you were doing well, very well.
Yeah, Adrian McGrath says it's the boss of the hurley, lads. Yeah, look, I just think something needs to be done with it, or maybe it's just like, and this is going to be very hard to police, but just in terms of like hurleys have to be policed a little bit more so that, they're not driving the ball too far.
I was going to say the hurl police, but it doesn't sound as well as the hurley police.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that video of the referee in some Sunday football league? He's checking the studs or whatever, like he used to do, and the lads just keep joining the line. And the line just keeps going and going and going. Imagine your hurls were being assessed before games. Nice comment in, actually, from Traumspieler. He says, in a fierce long queue at Dublin Airport here, surprise, surprise, everyone with long faces apart from me. I get to listen to the full show uninterrupted. Good man, happy days. We'll stay going and keep you going until you get to the end of the queue, Traumspieler, no doubt.
Yeah, we'll probably be just getting to the best part of the show, and then he'll have to turn off his Wi-Fi or his 3G. Good win for Galmoy at the weekend. Can they go far in the junior? We'll wait and see there. I'll just read out the last of the results. Maybe I'll end up repeating one or two of them. But Mullinavat 4-11, Erin's Own 11 points. That was the relegation semi-final, so that puts Mullinavat into the knockout stages. I think we've gone through them all, actually, at this stage. So the Clare relegation final, I'll just start off with that. So Wolf Tones 113, St. Joseph's Dour Bearfield 216. So that's relegation there for Wolf Tones, who were Munster champions in 1996. And Clare Castle, who were Munster champions in 1997, they're also gone. Their 91-year stay at the top level of Clare hurling is over. And you're just thinking Glen Rovers last week, they got relegated after 97 years at the top and obviously 3 times Munster champions. Jeez, it's mad when you see these teams dropping.
Yeah, Ratnor obviously something 80-something years at the top table in Wexford as well. And
You look at
once
the
you
stats,
drop,
say the Burr.
well, Jesus, we're
I'm joking, I'm joking.
we're a long way away from that.
I'm just winding you up.
But that can happen. That can happen very, very quickly. Now, people will tell you down around Clare Castle that they've been teetering with that for a while. I think they were county champions last in 05. I remember we played them in maybe 15 or 16. Still a very good side. Johnny Clancy was still on the go then. But like, you're not seeing names on senior county teams maybe anymore. Definitely not nearly as frequent as you would have in the past. But like, if St. Joseph's Dora Bearfield went down as well, it would have been two really big hitters going down. But by all accounts, and obviously from reading that book, The Club, that Christy O'Connor did many years ago, Dora Bearfield is, probably nearly stronger at football now than they are at hurling, and that's just the probably nature of it. But yeah, sad weekend for Dalo and the boys down in Clare Castle, definitely. And it's going to be difficult to get back up. It's not simple. I was looking at an intermediate quarter final yesterday where Whitegate were beaten well by Tulla as well. Like, you go down and it's not simple once you go down.
Yeah, sometimes standards drop with with going down a level, rather than teams thinking we'll redouble our efforts. They get used to playing at a maybe slightly lower intensity level, feel we don't need to train as hard. So it's, a lot will depend on what the culture is like over the winter and how people try to redouble their efforts.
Well, look at Offaly, Shane, right? So Offaly were playing, and that's saying we're unbelievable or like that, but you're playing consistently at Leinster level, say 10, 11, 12, 13, and then slowly but surely you're down at ring level and you don't get out ring the first year, and you're in McDonough and you don't get out like it's a long road. It can be a long road back for different clubs and counties when you slip away from that top table.
Yeah, like I'm just looking at some of the other Munster champions, and people might comment in and let us know of some of the Leinster teams over the years that have been maybe Leinster champions, All-Ireland champions, and have dropped down a little bit. I'm looking at Ross Gray here with their two Munster title wins. They only just came back up from intermediate last year, and to be fair to them, got out of the group and really acquitted themselves very well. Carrick Davins, 1967, they were the Munster champions. My Carricky Burris are only back up senior not too long ago. Ballybrown, actually, they are senior, of course, but there's other teams there as well. Kappa White, Dunhill and Waterford, teams that are either getting to Munster finals. You even mentioned Tulla there. They got to a Munster final as well. So like, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to stay up at the top level forever. Emil89 says that Clare Castle were saved relegation last year by due to score difference controversy. Wolf Tones and Dora Bearfield have already been up and down to intermediate a few times already. Adrian McGrath contests your point about St. Joseph's. They're not stronger at football. It's more that winning hurling matches is tougher in Clare. Joseph's have produced very good minor hurling teams recently. It's funny, actually. Do you know what? Just in terms of talking about football matches being harder to win because it's a stronger hurling county or whatever. Up in Antrim, like, I've often heard that Dunloy, who've just qualified for a final, and I think they're going to be playing Carrigan in the Antrim final, that they basically don't really train football that much. They take it up a little bit now and again, and they're into a final, and no doubt they're delighted to be in a final, but that it's very much on the hind tit in Dunloy, and that they do most of their focus on hurling.
I love that saying. The Galway people always say it, and just always say it about Galway and Leinster, that they're sick of being on the hind tit. Apparently, I was tuning into some pod or another the other day, and they were talking about the way Dunloy play, and it's actually quite refreshing the way they play. I don't think it's real defensive or anything like that. It's quite swashbuckling, kind of attacking type of football. Basically, I'd say
because they don't know how to do the possession, hold it forever type.
Exactly, yeah, and they're not practicing it the whole time. I'd say it would be a bit of a thumb in the eye of the aristocrats in Antrim football if they are able to win it and doing it like that. Like, I remember even Borough footballers back in the day, like, we played Eden Derry in a junior final, and like, Johnny P was out having a fag 15 minutes before the throw in and this kind of crack, and they're coming up against like Eden Derry, who were like staunch footballers, and Burr ended up beating them in the junior final, and it's taken quite badly. And I know it's only a junior final or whatever, but I can't imagine what it'd be like at senior level. They obviously have a lot of tasty footballers though. First final in 82 years. Imagine they were able to do the double. Probably going to be difficult. Oh, I know the hurlers obviously be favourites going into it. Footballers will be fairly roaring underdogs, I'd say. And the thing is as well with this is that you don't want to start taking it too seriously all of a sudden either. Because then all of a sudden you lose maybe what brought you to the dance, if you get me. So I'd say just keep doing what you've been doing.
At Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4, the Wolf Tones now have Darrell Owen, Shanaher, and Rory Hayes. I suppose just having good quality players doesn't guarantee us doing particularly well, because you see a lot of clubs across the country, they've got some top quality players, and for whatever reason, maybe there's a culture gap between the club and county players. Maybe the club players are particularly low quality. Maybe the county players don't care when they come back to the club. It just doesn't guarantee anything.
Look at the Glen as well, Shane. We went down through it last week. Patrick Horgan, Owen Downey, Rob Downey, Stephen McDonald, Simon Kennefick, Dean Brosnan. Like there's like 6 really good players at club level, but for whatever reason, when things are going wrong, maybe it doesn't. A lot of time it doesn't matter who you have when things aren't going great and confidence is down.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll continue on with the Clare Championship here. So the quarterfinals over the weekend, Kilmaley beat Fecal 213 to 118.
They did not. Fecal beat Kilmaley.
Sorry, got it wrong. So joy for Gerlach Nan's club there. And then the other game one of the other games, this game on Saturday, the other Saturday game, went to extra time. Scariff 319, Clooney Quinn 122. Like we were talking beforehand, will this be Mark Rodgers against Peter Duggan? Mark Rodgers finished up with 312. So the 2020 intermediate champions, they're within one victory of a county final. Their first appearance there since 1995. So I'm sure that Adrian McGrath, who is a staunch Scariff man, and rightly so, being staunch for his own club. Oh, look, and he's coming in with a comment. This is related to Wolf Tones. They do have them and Dahi Lowton as well. They've a limited panel and have been B and C at underage for years. Are Scariff coming, Adrian? I'd say
they definitely are. He'll 100% play it down. Just quickly, Shane, we'll talk about the other 2 quarterfinals in a minute, but it's very novel what we have left in Clare now. So I think the draw is tonight. So Crusheen, Clonlara, Scariff, and Fecal. So across the 4 quarterfinals, all 4 favourites are beaten. Crusheen were last champions in 10 and 11, beaten finalists in 14. Clonlara were champions in 08. Beaten in the finals in 9, 15, 16. Fecal were champions in 88, haven't made a final since. Scariff were champions in 1953, finalists then in 60, 91, and 95. And in the entire history of Clare hurling, there have only been 3 finals where these teams have played. Fecal played Scariff in 1917 and 46, and Clonlara played Scariff in 1919. Like this is like there's a potential for a Scariff Fecal semi-final here, and to have a really novel team in it. Then there's also a potential for them to be on opposite sides and for them to play in the final potentially. It looks wide open at the minute. You might go in and chat about the other two quarterfinals. I know Clonlara were on the telly yesterday. Saw most of it. Terrible conditions, but Clonlara looked to have a bit more of an edge to them this year, I think, by the looks of it.
Yeah, and I'll read out the result from the other game. Crusheen, who were being coached by Aidan Hart, they beat Newmarket and Fergus. And Newmarket and Fergus were the most recent winners in 2012, 3-7 to 1-7. 3 first half goals there. The other game then is going to be, Clonlara 114, Aero Guinness 14 points. And Colm O'Mara's goal in the 14th minute was crucial for a finish, because they were always just ahead and Aero were always trying to pull them back and couldn't quite clamber over them. I thought John Conlon was very, very good. When he got on the ball, like he's just such a physical animal that, especially in conditions like that, it's one thing kind of keeping into a lad when they're changing direction and the ground is nice and firm and all that. But if you have a big lad barreling at you like that and he can bounce off you when the ground is soft underfoot, you nearly have to go in a little bit more tentatively, stand off them a little bit. Not always, but at times. And he scored 5 points. I just thought it was gas at the end of the game. Now, he'd obviously been through a heap of work throughout the course of it, but he went to solo into the corner to sort of time waste or wind down the clock, whatever way you want to look at it. And I'm not saying it as a criticism, doing the right thing for his team. But to me, he was doing it because he was absolutely banjaxed at that stage. And he was sort of half falling over himself, trying to keep a defender away. And I was just like, do you know what? I mean, club lads, are they that far off the fitness level when a top inter-county player is also flagging? Or maybe it's just because he has to get on the ball so much as the inter-county player that he's probably expended more energy than the average player out there.
I'd probably go with the latter, I'd say, because he's obviously playing centre back and he's up centre forward for the club, which is a good bit different as well. Centre back, like he's he's covering mostly the same ground a lot of the time for Clare. And don't get me wrong, he expends a hell of a lot of energy, but he's probably not covering nearly as much ground as he is at centre forward, where he's travelling back the pitch as well. And as you say, I do think there is an onus on county players to take even more responsibility, more work on. And he definitely did. That was kind of funny when he was doing that to waste time. We were doing something similar in an underage football match. We were playing road and we were beating him, and he just went and it started throwing all these dummy solos and soloing into the corner and just kind of crack. You do, and thankfully it didn't backfire or anything like that. But he was fairly heroic yesterday. It was interesting to hear him speaking after. I think he said they've won the B championship for a couple of years now, maybe twice or something in the last couple of years. So you go back into the B after basically going out of the A. And he said they were kind of celebrating in the dressing room after last year. And a load of them just checked each other and we're like, we're celebrating a B title here. I've won anyway, a county title before, and some other lads have as well. We really should be aiming an awful lot higher. And I thought they were dogged yesterday. There was a doggedness to them that I haven't seen probably in a while. They were underdogs going into that match. They'd be probably favourites for the championship maybe from here on in. But yeah, that was a dogged display. For Ennis, again, another year goes by without a county title. Haven't been in the final last year, been beaten a point, I think, by Ballyea. Definitely a score anyway. And then not getting over a quarter final is kind of disappointing. The pressure was on and they didn't deal with it particularly well.
Put it this way, from play 110 to 3 points.
Yeah. That kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to be fair, like Shane O'Donnell, he battled valiantly. David Reedy battled valiantly. They did throw everything at it, but they were certainly second best as far as I'm concerned. Adrian McGrath says Scarf versus Fecal would be huge. Three Clare teams and Crusheen, huge change from the mid-Clare dominance. Michael, did Burr have like 12 or 13 on the county panel in the 90s? 3 Whelans, 2 Pilkingtons, Regan, 2 Hanafys, Claffey, Joe Erty, Mullins.
It would have been even higher in 02, 03. It would have been even higher. I'm going to say maybe 11 starters in a championship game one year, which is not necessarily a good thing. But there was, I think there was 12 or 13 on a squad at one stage and maybe 10 or 11 starters. The new players that would have been added onto that list would have been like JP O'Mara, maybe Stephen Brown, Rory, Gary Hanafy, the 3 Whelans, Claffey, probably a couple more as well. I think there was 10 or 11 starters for a championship game once. Brian Mullins as well, yeah, definitely, yeah. It's kind of mad. I don't know, is it a good thing though? I don't know, is it a good thing?
Yeah, Adrian McGrath adds the Senior B semi-finals, the Bridge against Ballyea and Cratloe against Ina Kilnamona. Like in some ways, if they were the Senior A semi-finals, you'd be like, oh yeah, fair enough.
Oh, you definitely would. 100% you would, yeah.
How many in 94, Mick, do you know?
Joe Erty came in for Shea McGuckin, Brian Whelan, Johnny Pilkington, Dottie Regan, Declan Pilkington, Brian Hennessy on the subs. I think that was it, which is much better. It's a much better balance. It would have been 3 or 4 Rhinus, 3 or 4 Clarine, maybe 1 Lusma, couple of Coolderry, but better balance to it. You don't want like Ballygunner would be the only side you take for Waterford. If they had 8 on the team, you'd probably be happy enough, wouldn't you? But and Ballyhale would be the same as well. But outside of that, would you be happy with any other club team having that sort of representation on a county team? Maybe? Yeah, maybe, because the pick is much smaller. Like Na Piarsaigh and Limerick, what are you looking at? Will O'Donoghue, 2 Caseys, maybe 1 more, 4. Patrick's well, 3, 4. Do you know what I mean? You don't want too many more, probably.
Yeah, with Clonlara here, they're missing the 2 Donovans. Tots O'Connell wasn't there. Derek Honan, like Colin Galvin was playing, and you can see he's certainly, carrying a little bit of, the legacy, I suppose, of his hip injuries. And maybe it wasn't the day for the smaller players either. But like himself and Ian Galvin obviously battled away. And you just wonder, like, the talent that Clonlara have produced over the years. Imagine if they had absolutely everyone fit and flying. And wasn't it kind of disappointing to see how the weather had such an impact in the games in terms of there was endless rucks? And I think at times the referee refused to kind of blow for things because he was just like, okay, I think one player's kind of gone in for contact, the other lad has kind of swallowed him up a little bit. Let's just keep playing it here rather than constantly blowing for frees and slowing up the game even more than it already is. I kind of felt that when I was watching some matches.
Yeah, we kind of have to. If you had a lad that was whistle happy in those conditions, you'd end up blowing every 2 seconds, wouldn't you? No, SSRI Paul Cleary wouldn't have been on the Offaly panel in 02. He started in 04. His baptism of fire was against Kilkenny that day. They scored 6:30 in Croke Park. And yes, Richard, there was 2 Lusma in 3 Lusma in 94. Jim Troy, John Troy, and Brendan Kelly, actually, yeah.
Was Jim Troy not in goals in 94?
He was, yeah. Jim Troy in goals. John was centre forward and Brendan Kelly was full forward, yeah.
Okay, so the Limerick draw, the quarterfinals, that's being drawn this evening. We already know that Kilmallock and the Piershig have been parachuted directly to the semi-finals by dint of their position in the group stages. Munger, St. Paul's and Ballybrown will be coming from Group 2, and they'll be playing one of Patrickswell and Doon apiece. So that's just the way it works out. It's going to be the Group 2 teams who have just named against the Group 1 teams. So the results over the last number of days, there was games played, I think from Thursday onwards, they were played out. So Ahan, they scored 13 points against Doon's 2-13. So Adam English and Dara Stapleton, they scored the goals there to win by 6 points. I'm sure people might have seen that Samba hurling goal that Adam English scored. Really excellent stuff. Kildimo Palace Kenry 1-14. Patrickswell 3-17. So Kildimo have lost every game as far as I remember correctly. Jordan Higgins, John Flynn and Aaron Galland, they all hit the net for the well. They finished 4th on 6 points, but they're through all the same. Obviously, Group 1 is much stronger than Group 2. So finishing in the top 4 will get you through there. Kilmallock 1-9, the Piershig 20 points. Ronan Lynch, he was the top scorer. He scored 8 points there. They finished top of the group. But they're not going to be unduly concerned there. And by that, I refer to Kilmallock because they were already through. So they can sort of go into that game pulling up a little bit.
I think so, yeah. I think like they're already through to a semi-final. They'll probably get a good challenge game over the next couple of weeks, and they'll be maybe the weekend the quarterfinals are on, and they'll be ready to go for the semi-finals. Yeah, wouldn't read too much into the Piershig Kilmallock result. I don't think anyone thinks there's too much between them anyway. Or throw Patrickswell into the mix as well. I don't think there's too much between the three of them. Doon are probably capable on a given day to take out somebody, but I just don't think they have the strength and depth given the injuries they have. Missing Richie English, I think Josh Ryan is still out. They're missing a couple others as well. They might take out someone on a given day, but I don't think they're going to be capable of winning this year. And the results have been a bit up and down, but they'll be happy enough that they've won the games that they kind of should win, if that makes sense. You know the way you always say in snooker, you know when me and you were playing the not great standard, that you pot the balls that you should be potting. Do you know what I mean? The ones that are there to be potted, and Doon have won the games that they would have been expected to win, even though they're missing a couple. Good result at the weekend, and that was a lovely goal. Started with a lovely Darragh O'Donovan sideline, straight to hand, ball through hand, and then Adam English ended up back with the ball. Lovely, lovely finish.
Aidan McGrath says the Limerick Championship format is the most boring in hurling, total preservation of the top 4. So people who aren't familiar with it, it's 2 groups of 6. Group 1 is the top 6 teams, 4 of the 6 go through. And then Group 2 is 6 teams, but the top 2 go through. So,
I don't understand what he means by the preservation. Like, if they're the best 4 teams, they're going to keep finishing in the top 4.
They'll all be playing at that higher level of intensity, which means they'll be up there, and the other teams that are playing in a lower level, is it going to be as easy for them to compete when they do jump up a level into the quarterfinals and they're meeting a level of intensity they haven't played against?
So he wants the 12 mix basically then.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what he wants, but that seems to be the debate between the two of them.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't happen. I know it doesn't happen in Offaly anyway. The 12 teams would be mixed. It would be a seeded top of each group, 2 semi-finalists one in each group, quarter-finalists, 1 in each group, and vice versa. So, yeah, maybe there's something to that.
Hugh Paddy seems to think you're an ape, which we all do. He says, weird snooker analogy. You didn't say that, Hugh Paddy, but I'm kind of paraphrasing.
I'll wangle in any sort of a snooker reference. By the way, it was obviously last weekend, but when Ronnie is on, he is still the best in the land, and he was on in Shanghai a couple of weeks ago, or the weekend before last.
Yeah, ML89, 4 usual semi-finalists in Limerick again. The Piershig with everybody are probably 4 or 5 points better than the other three. The other three clear of the rest by a good bit and could catch nap on an off day. Doon were missing all their 6 backs from last year in match 1 this year.
Yeah.
And River Power has talked about Adrian McGrath is always firing shots at Limerick like a good Clare man. And Adrian McGrath says, like, to back up his point about how it just preserves the top teams, look at Limerick's semi-finalists for the last 10 years. I think it's been the same 4 for the last 4 or 5 years, hasn't it? Actually, with the exception of South Liberties last year.
Yeah. They had a fair result over the weekend as well to save their status too with the 7 goals that they got.
Yeah. Let's see. Gary Spillane, 218. South Liberties, 713. This was in Group 2, so that preserves South Liberties' place in Group 2. So that was a huge performance for them. Barry Nash hit 2-5, 1-3 of that from place balls. Tom Ryan, he scored 2-2. Barry Cooney scored 1-2. So that's Gary Spillane down. They were just a bit too porous at the back end for... I think it was like 5 defeats in a row for South Liberties before this, but they produced when it really mattered in this match. Munger St. Paul's, they've not only guaranteed their position in the knockout stages, but they're going to be playing in Group 1 next year. They beat Ballybrown 217 to 23 points. Liam Lynch hit 112. And Ballybrown just about qualified for the quarterfinals on scoring difference because of there. They had a 17 points to 1-7 win over Monaleen, but it just wasn't quite enough here. Comments, Park Gill Shane, would you not take too kindly to referring to your standard as poor? That man is the master of the rest. What's that referring to?
I'm not sure. Sorry, snooker. Yeah, he's basically saying that you're basically the Sean Murphy of the amateur world in snooker with the rest.
Sorry, he meant the rest. Yeah, I'm actually not bad with the rest. Do you like using the rest?
I don't mind it. Yeah, I don't mind it. Yeah, you have to keep the elbow up. The elbow has to stay at like a 90-degree angle, or if it's anywhere down like that, you don't get consistency.
Wouldn't bother me. Do it anyway. No,
not for me.
Pop the ball straight on into the pocket. Actually, do you know what? I'd prefer a ball always at a slight angle rather than one dead straight. I find I mess those ones up a nice bit.
I found, I remember listening, someone was describing it. Basically, for those really straight pots, you just focus on the middle of the cue ball and nothing else. You don't even look at the object. You set yourself up, you focus on hitting exactly dead in the middle of the cue ball and nothing else. You don't have to focus on the object ball at all. And I've actually found it works generally, because a lot of the time you end up striking the cue ball in the wrong spot. But that's all for another day. That's all for our snooker challenge whenever it happens.
I'm not quite sure it is. Oh, like
just on that, River Power says the rest, the swan and the spider. The swan we always refer to as the nose picker. You know, it's that miserable big long yoke. Anytime you're using that, you're in trouble.
But it's do they not usually say the swan neck?
We don't just refer to it as the swan or the nose picker, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever not have one of those rests that has the sort of extended arm, or whatever, the extended cue, so you can't quite reach where you want to go with the cue? So sometimes what I've done is I've had the rest, but I've also had just a normal. I'd often put the spider on top of the rest. So you're trying to get it's awkward as hell, but sometimes you have to just to try and.
Have you ever seen Mark Williams, that unbelievable thing he does when he holds the rest up off the table and plays the... Oh my God, that's unbelievable to be able to hold it that steady. And
you see his young lad had a break of 80 there the other day.
Yeah, savage. Yeah. The future is fairly bright, I'd say.
You might go through the Westmeath Championship there.
Yeah, surely will. Westmeath semi-final yesterday, and great drama in it. So Derek McNicholas, obviously the Westmeath stalwart, he scored a late goal to hand Loughlin Gales a dramatic and shock 116 to 115 victory over holders Castletown Gagan yesterday in Cusack Park. So the recently retired county star, it said this morning, which I wasn't aware of. Maybe he is. He would have been the longest serving inter-county hurler. I think he started in 2004. So fair play, Derek, if you have hung up the boots. I know he came out of retirement late this year, but he sent the Gale supporters into raptures when he crashed the ball to the roof of the net in the third minute of injury time. After an initial shot was blocked, and they had actually been in a really good position, Loughlin Gales, until they conceded 1-1 at the end of normal time. They were trailing 114 to 16, and McNicholas got that goal. Tommy Doyle is actually up centre forward. He was over in the States for the summer. I'm sure he's a bit of a handful under the high ball. And Shane Williams, he scored 10 points. He seems to be kind of one of the new kind of common players in Westmeath. But yeah, that's a big upset, you'd have to say, with Loughlin Gales dumping out Castletown Gagan.
Yeah. Okay. How much for an hour of snooker nowadays? I've kind of seen it around 20 quid. It kind of jumped up a nice bit after COVID.
What we used to have in Burr was the place we play in. It's actually the old British Legion. That's where it was. It's called the Social Club now. But you used to give €1 and you'd get 10 minutes. You get an old 50 pence piece and you put it into the meter. But I think with electricity and everything now, I think you get 8 minutes for €1. So that's not too bad either. It's what, €8 for 64 minutes. It's not bad now. I've played the guts of 64-minute frames now at times.
Oh, and I'm sure they're thrillers to watch. Joe Butler says one-sided disasters here in the Mayo Round Robin Hurling Championship. Castlebar, Mitchells and St. Kieran's are very poor junior sides and not up to that level. Turin so far ahead of the rest. 2 hammerings. A180 says, we still have it. It's €1 for 7 minutes.
It's gone again. Inflation. It'll be €1 for 5 minutes yet. I tell you a good one, actually. One fella back in the day. So obviously you give in your €1, say you give €5 and you get handed 5 50 pence pieces and you put them in one at a time or you put them all in or whatever. But one young fella came down and he thought he was being really smart or whatever, but he brought down old £1 coins and expected that if he put the pound coin in that he'd get 20 minutes for the pound coin. But it didn't quite work that way. The pound coins are probably still in there now, I'd say.
What about the Offaly Football Championship final yesterday? Forban 6 points, Tullamore 1-5. I mean, the conditions have a lot to sort of, have to be accounted massively here. Never going to be a classic in conditions like that, but fair play to Tullamore.
No, it was never going to be a classic anyway. Tullamore play a very kind of tight, defensive enough kind of style. I think I said something like 110 to 111 or something in the preview show. The conditions obviously made it even worse. I think there was 20 minutes of the second half without a score. Like if you're looking for a game on telly, like this is like that type of fare is not the sort of stuff you want on telly, basically. But fair play to Tullamore. As I said, without Johnny Maloney, who's transferred to Mike Cullen, I think they beat Anna Down on Saturday night. It's a big win for them. I think it was Harry Plunkett got the goal in the first half, and John Furlong kicked a brilliant point in the second half. John Furlong is definitely a name you're going to be hearing a hell of a lot more about if he stays fit. He was brilliant for the under-20s when they won the All-Ireland. If he stays fit, he'll be a mainstay for Offaly for many years to come. I have to say as well, there was an instance in the game where Chris Dwyer showed red cards to I forget who the Tullamore man was, but Paddy Clancy was definitely the Forban man. He gave them both red cards or whatever. And then he actually conferred with the umpires and dished out 2 yellows. And like it's the first time I've seen it really in a game where a referee has changed a decision. And fair play to him. Someone obviously was in his ear. He handed out the reds fairly quickly. Someone was obviously in his ear and said, listen, I'm not so sure about that. You need to come in and talk to us or whatever. So at least he changed the decision if he thought it was wrong or if he didn't fully see the incident or whatever. But it's not something that happens too often.
Yeah, a bit random says Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4. But lads, do you ever play a game without a helmet? And if so, are you a bit more hesitant to attack a ball without protection? So, but I'm not entirely sure what you mean. But like,
he just means back in the day, would you have hurled a match without a helmet on?
Yeah,
before they can pay compulsory.
Yeah, but I just don't get the second part.
No, just or I'd say it's probably like, did you wear a helmet all your life, or did you not wear a helmet for the first part of your career, and would you just go head into anything and not think about the possible effects in your eyes, or would you have been standing back a small bit? I think that's kind of maybe what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think I would have been bald-headed straight in anyway. I definitely got a couple of clips in the head over the years. I got my lower tooth smashed. You can probably see it there. And I definitely got a scar somewhere across the forehead. It was actually a drill burst lead on the park. And it was a sort of thing where someone runs at you and you try and hold them up or whatever. But he kind of caught me in the nook of the arm. And you know the way that, like, if you get touched there, sometimes it can make your arm do that. My own Hurley came around and caught me just above the top of the eye. So I got a nice little clip there. Yeah, no, I think you were just so used to it back at the time. It didn't cross your mind so much. And generally, I know it can look a violent sport and God, you're going to get your head taken off. But for the most part, people know how to enter tackles. So they don't really get clipped that often. It's the same even, I suppose, to some degree now. Most of the time, you'd think your hand's about to get smashed. But most people in most games get away with it. Obviously, some of us break our hands 7 and 8 times but most people are getting away with it nearly all the time.
I thought it was always gas. John Milan was a big one for it. If he got touched in the head, he nearly always got a free. Like if a hurl touches off your head and you're not wearing a helmet, to me that's your own fault. Do you know what I mean? It's not like someone's going around with a hatchet trying to open you up or anything like that. But the second he used to get hit in the head, he'd be like he'd be going down or whatever. He used to always get a free for it. I wouldn't have the best eyes in the world, as you can probably see. So I always wore a helmet. I always wore a helmet.
Are they brown?
I don't actually know what colour they are, but I never would have ever even hardly poked around without my helmet on. Maybe poked around, but definitely not drills or anything like that. No way. Wouldn't risk it.
People, what do you think? What colour are Verney's eyes? I'm going to go with brown. It can be, are they sort of a bit of green?
I think they're a tint of green, yeah. Sort
of slurry, greeny. It regressed as people were more cautious with swinging around the head at that time, I think.
Jeez, I don't know if they were.
Well, pulling in the air was far more frequent back then.
Yeah, I always loved the centre forward pulling on the ball, breaking it through. Like you get blown now if you pulled like that, and it's perfectly legal. It's on the ball or whatever. But a lot of the time, if it's hurl on hurl now, it's a free. It's just because referees are so wary of it.
Yeah, lots of fixtures in Tyrone as well. Damn it, some of these team names are written down in Irish, so I'm going to get caught out, but I'll read them out as best I can. Galbally Pierce is 2-3. Drumore 1-8 there, so that was a win for Drumore. English 4 points. Dungannon 1-10. Edendorf 14. On Carrickmore, Nave, Columkill.
Carrickmore, yeah.
On Cashlawn, Gloss, Nave, Podrick 7 points. Fianna, Ullen 2-11. Huh? Any hands there?
Not really.
Omagh St. Enda's 1-6. Ardbow O'Donovan Rossa 1-8. Loch McCrory 13. Trillick 13. Trillick win 4-3 on penalties. This is knockout as well, so like that probably heightens it even more when you've only had one opportunity to play. Like this first round, they're gone now on penalties.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that? One championship game gone on penalties.
Tough.
Tough nuggies.
No, I know if I was probably with that team, you'd be furious, but I kind of think that my mind works that way, that I'm just like tough, so I'd say I'd probably accept it. I'd be frustrated, but I think I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, tough going now to be out at that stage. I think we have a small bit of info on it as well. So Joe Maguire, the goalkeeper, emerged as a hero with 2 spot kick saves to deny Loch McCrory what would have been a shock victory. Now Loch McCrory, if they were going to beat Trillick, it was probably going to be on that day. Because usually, the best team will, or the favourite team will prevail over the 2 days. But yeah, it's as cutthroat as they come in Tyrone.
I like this comment in here from PWell74. Wore a helmet from age 5, but shown son to block down a month ago with no helmet on. Got split open on the head.
Oh, no.
Egypt.
I don't know if you ever did that drill back in the day. Like, the OurGame Twitter had it up recently there. The old school football blockdown drill. But basically the hurling equivalent of that. Like where a lad just throws up a ball and you have to go in and get the dive and block. Like, number one, like 10, 15 hurls broken, I should say, in that drill. Number two, probably a fair chance of getting busted in the head. Probably a fair chance of getting busted in the hand as well. But a brilliant drill. It's very hard to practice blocking properly. Do you know what block I always loved? It's the best block in the game, is the distance block, where you've gotten your strike away and I have my hurl where I think the ball is going to go, and the ball is actually away, the strike is away, and about 5 yards into the strike, the hurl just blocks it. I think it's an unbelievable skill.
I think Oisin Goff used to have that as his profile picture on Facebook. So it was one of the Fennellys was doing a crossfield ball, and Oisin had taken flight. He was in the middle of the air. Presume he didn't get the ball, though. Made for a nice picture. But if it's Oisin Goff, he definitely didn't get that ball. That was by old teammate at Coola, for anyone who doesn't remember, the former Dublin cornerback. Traumspieler says, I'm through security, lads. Time for some smellies. Bit of Herm's cologne for me. No slurry smell around here.
Good man, Traumspieler.
I presume that's on sale now, Traumspieler. You're not going to go for the expensive stuff. Is it Tom Ford or some of these boys? I doubt you wear too much cologne, Verney.
I don't wear any cologne whatsoever. No. Natural.
Yeah, Moortown 2-8. Donegal Nave Podrick 1-10. Ergel Kieran 17. Quilon Clucker Nave Wirra 9 points. So Verney, move us on to Armagh.
Kelly Clocker, I'd say.
I love the Irish.
Yeah, there was plenty of drama in Armagh. Standout result is probably Crossmaglen Rangers beating Armagh Harps. That was after extra time, 21 points to 212. There were also wins for Madden against Ballymacnab. Killevy were beaten 1-9 to 7 against Clonagale, and Clonairon had a 2-10 to 1-6 victory over Silverbridge. A flight through Tipperary as well. Quarterfinals, loads of drama in that Lockmore Castellini Mile Rovers game. Mile Rovers kicked the winner. I think it was in the 7th minute of injury time to come out 1-10 to 12 points victories over Lockmore, or winners over Lockmore.
Do you think in a way that could be a blessing in disguise for Lockmore?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. Were they defending champions? They were defending champions in the football, were they?
Yeah, well, after winning the double. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or was it the year before? Jeez,
that was the year before.
No, the year before, because Clonmel won it last year when Killarwan won the Hurling, and then it was the year before Lockmore won both.
That's right. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, it probably gives them a bit more time to focus on, but they have the same management and mostly the same players as well. So I don't know. Maybe they kind of enjoy the week on week, even though it does take its toll. I know Ballina had some good results up until this weekend, but they were intermediate champions from last year. They were well beaten comprehensively. Clonmel Commercials 4-17 to 7 points. Upper Church Drumban 10 points. Kilsheelan and Kilcash 10 points. Upper Church won 7-6 on penalties. I'd say that was fairly dramatic anyway. And JK Brackens were 2-10 to 3-3 victors over Killinall. Semi-final draw is Clonmel against Mile Rovers and Upper Church versus JK Brackens.
And just to go back to Ballina, they were beaten well, but they were without David Kelly, who'd probably be their top forward, and Paddy O'Donovan and Michael Grace. They had to go off with first half injuries. Also, Stephen O'Brien, he had to go off injured before the finish. But look, they were comprehensively beaten. And sure, look, I think everyone knows the Clonmel Commercials are one of these teams that probably is eyeing up success beyond Tipperary even. In Cork then, Nemo Rangers, they beat Clonakilty 5 points to 4. God almighty, that must have been class to watch. Castlehaven, 14 points. Ballincollig, 1-8. Then in Galway, Moycullen, 2-11. Anna Down, 1-11. On Spidale, 2-7. Nave Anna, Lettermore, 1-9. Dunmore McHale's, 2-7. Clare Galway, 1-12. So Clare Galway winning that game. Mount Ballymylot, 12 points. Toon Stars, 13. And we were talking about that, how that might be a bit of a tasty fixture. It looks like it certainly provided that. St. James beat Milltown 2-6 to 1-6. Carfin against Barna, that was cancelled, as was Killannon against Carlisle and Salthill knocked Nacara against Uachtarard. So we're probably going to have lots of games. Well, I suppose there was plenty of games over the weekend that either they probably should have been called, like should Clonlara against Éire Óg have been called off when you saw the puddles of water on the pitch?
Realistically, it should have been, yeah. And it's not the only one. There were several different games. The problem is, and there's a fear with fixture makers here, if you call off a game, maybe the weather doesn't improve, it gets worse, then there's more congestion, more games need to be played, and there's a backlog, and then there's a hurling weekend running into a football weekend, and there's dual players potentially involved in some counties, and it gets really, really messy. But I know my nose would be a small bit out of joint if you have to train all year and you end up playing in that rubbish. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like anybody can win on a day like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Any sort of things happen. Like, you could take a shot on goal and the ball could stop 3 yards out in a puddle, like, or something. Do you know what I mean? It's just really, really messy.
You know, it wouldn't bother me so much, but like last week, and this is playing for Coola Juniors, because so many games were called off and all that kind of stuff, pitches were in bits, we ended up playing in the Astro up in Abbottstown and lost to Fogs and lost well. And by the way that game went, we would have lost no matter where we played them. So I'm not kind of trying to be bitter on it or anything like that, but it's probably not ideal playing on Astro. Now, it's fairly decent Astro and all that, but it would suit me if it was on an ignorant old wet pitch. Really?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, don't get me wrong, playing in Cusack Park yesterday would probably have suited us. It wouldn't suit a hell of a lot of other lads. There's a good question in here from Hurling.
Before we move on, like, if Éire Óg were playing on like a really hard pitch on a sunny day, you'd probably favour them against an awful lot of teams.
You would, of course, yeah. You would, of course, because they're nifty, fast, probably a lighter team, I'd say, as well. So you would have, definitely. Just a question in from Hurling 1, 2, 3, 4. Guys, what do you make at club level, a player coming back training a few weeks ago and plays a big championship game with other players who trained the whole year, been bypassed? But I can't say much now. I'm living nearly 2 hours away. and I was only down once a week, and I only came back in May or something like that. But I think a lot of it depends on how long have you been playing, how dedicated are you to the club, or do you know what I mean? There's probably a lot of mitigating factors in it.
Some people earn credit; they've credit in the bank.
A bit, yeah. Like I remember hearing, don't know how true it is, but I remember hearing when Chris Barrett, the former Mayo player, transferred to Clontarf, that he couldn't train that much. You know, he'd be under pressure at work or whatever in bits and pieces. And I think he kind of finished up with them quickly enough because they probably wanted him to be all in. Whereas if that was with his old club, who he'd played for the previous 15 years, like how much credit does he have in the bank there? If he only shows up for the matches, he probably still plays. I think it probably depends on the type of character involved and how dedicated maybe they are to the club. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same circumstances as well. You got to judge the mood around the place. Are people like, there's always going to be whoever's sitting on the bench and whoever is a sub that's probably coming on that goes down further down the pecking order. They're frustrated. And you can understand it. But if you're the manager and you're like, okay, yeah, he goes in. Like, I'm looking at it, for example, I just look at Kula. So Kula hadn't had Conor Callahan so far. He played at the weekend, scored a fine goal against Jude's, but Jude's won. And now the Kula footballers are out. Well, will Con be back hurling next weekend? I mean, I don't know because I'm not out there. I'm just, playing some junior games here and there. And, I'm not training, to be honest. And I'm kind of just been thrown in. But would anyone in Kula have any issue with Con going straight in? Absolutely not. As a starter, coming on as a sub, whatever, he's an awful lot of credit in the bank. And I think everybody knows, well, look, better chance of winning with him in the team.
And they haven't been lighting it up or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? So there's obviously some lads maybe not playing to top form or whatever. I think you have to realistically think, like, will Kula win a championship without Conor Callahan? Probably not. But they have a chance if he's in the team. You always have a chance if you have someone like that. And I think there's definitely, like, Jesus, talk about lads having credit in the bank. Don't have much more credit in the bank than the years there where he was probably the best club hurler in the country.
Yeah, how many frees did you miss, Shane, last weekend? I was taken off the frees just before the match because the minor game
unceremoniously.
And see, the minors, they were supposed to be playing that same day, but because their game was called off because of the weather, we were able to play a few of them then. So the frees were whipped off me. The manager said it just beforehand, and I just said to him, "I'm going to walk."
Yeah, well, he didn't tell you. He didn't tell you in the days beforehand, just in case you wouldn't show up.
No, I was laughing. Like, geez, I had no issue at all. Sure, look, might as well get a few points on the board rather than me just having a bit of crack taking a few frees. But let's go through the fixtures in the Dublin Senior Football Championship. Raheny beat St. Vincent's. That was 14 points to 1-8. So fair play to Raheny doing this with a couple of injuries there as well. Rob Henley, very influential in terms of his long-range free taking. Kilmacud, 14 points. Ballymun Kickham's 10. It is interesting, that Shane Walsh has had a few injuries and all that kind of stuff. And normally, like, he's, in terms of, like, conditioning, he looks one of the best players in the country. But you're just assuming he hasn't been able to do that much training because he's kind of looks like he's wintered a little bit. And look, I know that all that weight will fall off him or whatever, but it's so unusual to see him with a little small bit on him. And, there's no body shaming going on here or anything like that. But it's just unusual. And, like, how little has he been able to do lately? Because normally lads 28, 9, 30, whatever, training their whole lives. If they probably haven't been able to train a little bit, they won't put on much. But he's certainly got a little bit on him at the minute.
Yeah, I only saw bits and pieces of that, so I can't add much comment to that. But it definitely looks like Crokes are timing their run, shall we say. Definitely looks like they're timing their run again. Their hardest battles outside of the Glen game, maybe last year, have been in Dublin. And I thought it was interesting. Michael Darragh's comments even after the Ballyboden game, like, what are your goals or aspirations for this year, or what are the club hoping to do? And it's like somewhat tongue in cheek, somewhat not, saying that they want to win All Ireland and how much their noses are a giant, having been bet by double digits in the last two semi-finals. So that's an interesting one, and they have a great chance of getting through to a final now at this stage, the way the draws after working out.
Yeah, Richard Hogan, Shane doing a mic drop in the dressing room and walking out over the freeze. Laughing. SSRI, will Michael ever throw in his lot with Dunboyne eventually?
Moved away from Dunboyne, actually, out towards between Ashburn and Rathdot. The nearest GA club is Curraha, who only kick football. I doubt it, lads. If anybody wants me now, my time has gone.
Yeah, fair play to St. Jude's, 2-11 to 2-10 win over Coola there, very impressive. Ballyboden, St. Enda's 119, 11 points for Castleknock. Colin Baskell continues to be in brilliant form there. And great stuff for Dara Sweeney as well, going from Junior B to Junior A to Intermediate to Senior. Like, there are players out there that persevere and eventually they do make it.
That's fair going though, Shane. Like that is he's basically went up 4 grades. I know he didn't start the other night, but he's by all accounts he's been one of their best players throughout the group stages. That is fair perseverance now. That really is. I must get a bit more information on him because I think it's a really interesting story.
What's the name of that famous Welsh footballer who played in 4 different divisions and international football?
John Hartson?
No, Rob Earnshaw.
Craig Bellamy?
And there's one player at the moment in the Premier League, and this year he made history by becoming the first player to go all the way from non-league football to the Premier League with the one club. Give me his name.
Wow. With the one club, who's it? Luton, no?
Yeah, with Luton, yeah.
Jeez, with the player, I've no idea. I don't know if I could name a Luton Town player ever, been honest with you.
What about the current Irish international playing with them?
That's no, lost on me.
Chiedozie Ogbene.
Ogbene's Luton, is he? Okay. No, I could have been here all day. I wouldn't have got it.
Okay. And the player who's played in all those 5 different divisions is Peli Ruddock Mpanzu.
It was on the tip of my tongue.
Hey, would Verney ever do commentary watch along of some of his performances for Offaly, particularly Milan footage, to make the end of his time?
No way. Not the Waterford game. I do another game. No way. I haven't watched back the Waterford game, and I don't think I ever will. No way. If I ever end up in some sort of GA Big Brother or something like that, it could be a punishment maybe or something like that. Maybe that'd be some crack now. There's an idea now, or a sporting Big Brother or something like that. There's an idea.
So Ballyboden, they've been beaten heavily in the last 2 semi-finals, but look to be on a bit of a mission. I think Michael Darragh Macaulay, he's very refreshing afterwards, talking about wanting to win in All-Ireland. And it's just great when lads say stuff like that. The semi-final draw will see Kilmacud beat Raheny. Come on, let's call a spade, even if it's people that say, oh, you wrote us off. Well, Michael, are we happy enough to write off Raheny in the semi-final?
I think so, even with Brian Howard's injured now. I obviously had a great result at the weekend, beating Vincent's. I think Rob Henley kicked a few long-range frees. He obviously only transferred this year from Briefy, and they've really utilised his ability from long-range frees. But it's going to take a lot more than that to beat Kilmacud. Really. Like, Kilmacud can beat you by 3 or 4 and hammer you. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what they do, like.
And then another one, Turlestrane. St. Jude's against Ballyboden in the other semi-final. That should be very tasty and very physical. Turlestrane, they were looking for an 8 in a row this season, and they're out on score difference. Not just the first kind of level of score difference. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen here, but you like one moment here, and I'll just have it up now. Okay, so the situation was Coolra, Strand Hill, Drumcliff, Ross's Point, and Turlestrane. They all finished on 6 points each. Shamrock Gales and Tubbercurry down at the bottom end of this. As all 3 had the same number, and this is from Sligo GA, had the same number of league points and the same score difference from the head-to-head games, it went to scores 4 in the head-to-head games, where Coolra, Strand Hill, and Drumcliff, Ross's Point had 20 points, and Turlestrane had 19 points, thus eliminating Turlestrane. So that's quite something, isn't it?
That is a killer, isn't it? That is an absolute killer. Winning 3 or 4 games, in a group and ending up out. And it's not as if it's not as if they took it easy in a couple of the games. Like 1 point being the difference. That's a killer. And realistically, like if they'd gotten out of the group, they would have been heavy favourites, I'd imagine, to win. They obviously would have been the hottest of favourites to win 8 in a row. They were in the Connacht final last year as well. Like, do you know what I mean? That one would sting for a long time. Yeah,
for sure. Verney, did you ever mark Hoggy?
Yeah, once in a qualifier game in Tullamore. He actually came on. I think it was 2009 maybe. I just remember him getting a ball and me being actually in his face and I'm still striking it over the bar. Like, I was in on top of him, like, and it just bang, lean back like that. got a point. Actually did all right the same day. Frankie Murphy was started, and then Hoggy came in for the last 25 minutes. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, do you know what I mean?
If he put it over, but you were putting on savage pressure, I don't think anyone can criticise you.
No, I'm sure you will anyway.
Well, look, I'll find a way. Yeah.
No, I just remember thinking that day, like how the only way to stop him is to stop him getting the ball, because if he gets the ball, he'll find that bit of space. It was just like that, bang, wristy, like that.
Yeah, so Thurles 08, never forget, this is obviously you against Milan. Wouldn't be a long watch along, says your buddy Ace 2180.
Wouldn't even, you'd have your dinner eaten, I'd say. But no, you wouldn't have your dinner eaten, I'd say, by the time I was gone.
And SSRI has a comment for you.
Do I think Claudia Gales have a chance against the KKB team? If I'm honest, SSRI, I don't, because they got 2 players sent off against us, and there were 2 of their best players. Joey Keenan and Dylan Hyla both got straight red cards, and KK put up something like 6-30 against Lusman, their semi-final. Claudia Gales barely got over us. Now Liam Langton will be back for them, because I think he was sick when they played us, but I'd be shocked if they were within 3 or 4 of them, being honest with you. Kilcormac have a chance of winning Senior A, Senior B, Junior B, and they won the junior football at the weekend as well.
Split them up into Kilcormac and Killahy.
Oh, that's controversial, because in certain parts out there, they would call it Killahy Kilcormac. That's how, do you know the way, like, and that means a lot to people, which one comes first.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Now, if you and the lady, if you had to go with a double barrel surname for your child, whose surname would come first?
No, we do have a double barrel, and Elaine's name comes first, yeah.
And do you prefer it that way? Now, if I was in that situation, I'd like to have my surname second, because then, you know, it's kind of like it's the final word.
Yeah, she reckons that they'll just use the last name predominantly. I hadn't really thought about it, that they just, as you say, because it's the last one, I hadn't really thought about it, and I don't really care too much, but R comes before V, so it makes more sense anyway.
RV.
RVD.
Hey, so subscribe to the channel. I hit that button by mistake, but certainly do if you don't already, if you haven't already done so. Go to the week. We haven't thought about it.
No, we haven't, and it's been a few minutes since we actually talked about games. But on a hurling side, I'm going to have to go with Liam Blanchfield. As we mentioned, an absolute goal machine at club level, 4-2. Albeit one of them fairly lucky. He definitely been my hurling goal of the week anyway.
I go ahead and give it to Tomas Keys, because he scored the crucial penalty when everyone else seemed to be panicking. It was 1-1 when he was hitting that deciding penalty. So I think he deserves a little bit of hop for doing that.
Just when you were talking there, I won't mention the teams that involved, but you were basically saying there when he held his nerve when others didn't or whatever. But there was a match played last year, and a local commentator, the goalkeeper was having a bit of a mare, and the local commentator said that, you know, if you're hurling in front of him, you'd need to be wearing a nappy. No, I thought that was particularly funny now, I have to say. As regards football goats of the week, geez, my head is blank for football now, I have to say.
I give it to Joe Maguire for saving 2 penalties the other night for Trillick.
Yeah, but in particular in Dublin stand out. Probably give it to Colin Pascal, who I wonder, will he be in the Footballer of the Year conversation? I wonder, will he? He's definitely a dark horse for it, but he's definitely, like, it's gas. Like, this was probably his 3rd coming with Dublin this year. Wasn't guaranteed to start in the team. Will surely get an all-star, I'd say, and could be in the Footballer of the Year conversation. He was brilliant at the weekend.
Yeah, Joe Butler says, go to the week, Liam Blanchfield 4-2 against Tollerone, or Richie Kane.
Stop, Joe. You can't give it to Richie.
Goal against Clare, real gem. Very harsh, Joe. Galway with an unending amount of numbers there. Verney, Pádraig Malloy, riskiest ever, left hand on top or right hand on top?
Pádraig Malloy from Burr. Maybe so, yeah. I presume he's referring to Pádraig Malloy from Burr.
KK in the Junior A's, Junior B's, not in knockout. So, lads, watching the video of Player of the Year, I know Wexford were shocking, terrible management setups, says Barton, but Lee Chin deserved Player of the Year for Wexford, albeit in a terrible year. We're kind of thinking that he wouldn't even want to hear that. He'd just be so disgusted. A bit like a player getting man of the match when they've lost an All-Ireland semi-final. Have a look at the video of Seamus Hickey when he's been handed that award with your man in the Eagle.
Draw. It's raw. That's all I remember him saying.
Troutspieler says Mark Rodgers 312 goal.
That's kind of Mark Rodgers' exploits at club level are becoming like commonplace nearly from now, aren't they? In fairness, which is a great sign. I just think themselves and Fecal are on a bit of a crest of a wave, and like, I wouldn't be if they avoid each other or whoever they play. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if one of them ends up winning the whole thing out. Genuinely, just because they're
in the last four.
you know, like.
Okay, that's it for the show this week. If you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame. We'll be back later in the week. Michael, take it handy.
See you, Shane.